Hello, everybody. I'm Ed. I'm one of the co-founders of Hustle Badger. We've also got the other co-founder of Hustle Badger, Susanna, on the call, who will be moderating the chat and probably posting a few helpful links in there. But today we're going to talk through product roadmaps, and I'm going to share a few different types of roadmaps that you can use. Also, talk through some more general principles. Now, just before we get going, a few kind of housekeeping notes. So this is being recorded. We will share the recording and all the links that we mention in here by email. So don't worry about that. Um, Please do stay on mute so that everyone else can hear what I'm saying. But please do ask questions in the chat, and if there's anything you want me to cover, and I will do my best to kind of keep one eye on the chat and answer those questions as we go along. For those of you who aren't familiar with Hustle Badger, we provide training and support to product managers. We have self-service courses. We have a wiki or a library of kind of articles and playbooks. We've got a bunch of templates to help you get started. We've got lots and lots of webinars on our YouTube channel, which are a bit like this. We also have a private community on Slack where product managers can help each other out. And we also run workshops at companies and do bespoke training programs for companies. And what makes us different is that, firstly, we're expert led, like everyone who writes content for us and who is part of the company is being a seasoned operator. So they've worked in tech companies and in product management for a number of years. So we know that this stuff actually works. And then we've designed all of our materials to both be immediate to use. So you can put them to work straight away and you can get value, in minutes, not in sort of like weeks or months of, going on a course. And it's also, it's kind of battle tested. It's, we tried tested. We've done this before, and we've laid it out in a very step-by-step way that allows you to kind of piggyback off our experience. So that's the kind of whole thinking behind Hustle Badger. Now, this particular webinar, we're going to talk about roadmaps. This is sort of like, one of many playbooks in one of many topics. And if we look at like one of those topics, so this is accountability and ownership, then you can see that, roadmaps is kind of like slots in here, but there's a whole bunch of other playbooks and articles that we've got just in this section. And, I think we've got like 7 or 8 of these different sections that we cover. So we've got a very comprehensive offering, which is one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on. But that just kind of tells you a little about what we're going to cover today. So I'm just going to have a quick check of the questions before we get going. Client-facing roadmaps, great. Different options for roadmaps, we're going to cover that for sure. How to keep roadmaps updated. Yeah. Okay. Super. We're going to cover, so all the questions so far, I think we're going to cover, but you can give me a shout if I don't answer your question. So what we're going to cover, I'm going to start off talking a little bit about what our roadmap's for, and I'm then going to talk about different types of roadmaps on a kind of spectrum between more strategic roadmaps and more tactical roadmaps. And then I'm going to run through 6 roadmap templates and what they're good for and what they are not so good for. So you've got a bit of inspiration about how to what roadmaps might be useful for you. So what are roadmaps for? I mean, at the very basic level, roadmaps visualize what you will work on and when. Simple, right? And that is useful because it helps you coordinate dependencies between different teams, not just different product tech teams, but also with sales, marketing, like other teams about the company. They allow you to allocate people and money to different topics because as a product leader, as an exec, then the way that you execute on your strategy is by, not doing the work yourself, but by allocating money and people against different problems. They help you synchronize your go-to-market, so get all of your sales and marketing efforts aligned with when things are released, and they help you track progress the progress of teams and forecast delivery. So they effectively they help you know if things are on track, and because you can then see ahead of time whether things are on track or not, they give you really valuable information to know whether your team needs support to get back on track. So you can take preemptive, you know, make preemptive interventions to make sure people hit their deadlines, even if they're falling behind. And finally, as a result of all of those things, they help build transparency and trust. So when you expose your work, not just as a product person, but it's any kind of discipline, and people can see what you're doing, then that helps you build a relationship with them because they know sort of how things are going. So that said, there's lots of different audiences who all have slightly different needs. And this isn't meant to be an exhaustive list, but just to kind of illustrate the point that if you think about all the people who want to know what's going on in the product team, you've got execs from around the business who want to know what the product strategy is. They want to know whether the product teams are delivering. Are they doing good work? How they should be allocating people and money. You've got sales and marketing teams who probably want to know when they should be telling customers and people, prospects about new features. They want to know if they've got support to hit their own goals. You've then got support teams, customer service, who need to know kind of up to date how the platform actually works and how they can solve customer problems. And obviously, you've got engineers as well who want to know what they're working on and how they should be thinking about the designing the architecture of the platform and what are the dependencies that they have between themselves and other teams. So with all these different people with different needs, it's unlikely that the same roadmap is going to serve all of them all of the time. And one of the themes you'll kind of probably hear me come back to kind of a number of times is that there is not one best roadmap that you can adopt, unfortunately. Otherwise, everyone would have it, right? There are a few different variations which are common patterns, and these might inspire you to come up with something that is going to solve your most pressing problems. Now, broadly, I kind of think of you know a spectrum of roadmaps that's kind of on one hand you get kind of quite high level strategic views. They generally cover maybe 12 months or more, maybe even 2 or 3 years. These are really good at showing you the resource allocation. So like how much money, how many people are we putting against different problems and different initiatives? And they help show that kind of balance of time you're spending against things. On the other hand, you've got very tactical roadmaps. These are usually quite short term, so might even just be 2, 3 months. And at this end of the spectrum, you're talking about kind of high integrity commitments where you've got very clear delivery dates, and this is sort of helping you coordinate, when things are released and go to market, and interlocking parts of big cross-functional projects. Again, just having a quick look at the chat there. So that said, that there are lots of different roadmaps. Um, there are a few kind of principles or roadmap, markers of good roadmaps and markers of not so good roadmaps, which I will very quickly run through. So good roadmaps, visualize the product strategy. So they take a product strategy which might be quite wordy. They put it on a piece of paper. They show you like how it's going to play out. They give people that sense of like, how are we actually going to deliver the product strategy? They build credibility. So good roadmaps will help the product team make realistic commitments and make those realistic commitments visible to people. And then by delivering on those commitments, you get more trust. They generate buy-in and alignment around what you're planning to do because people can very easily see what your plans are. And they make it clear how you're going to achieve results. So if a product team is primarily concerned about delivering impact, a good roadmap shows how you're going to get to that impact. Like what are the things that you might build to get there? So we mentioned they're kind of bespoke to the audience. So they're going to be, you might have multiple roadmaps at different levels of the organization or on different timeframes doing slightly different things. There's not necessarily kind of one one roadmap that's going to work for all situations. Um, a good roadmaps really often are very clear about what you're not going to get done, and so they force all those conversations about what falls outside of scope up front, so that you don't have those late in the day when it's a done deal, but you can have those up front where you can still change your mind and make sure everyone's aligned on what's going on. Bad roadmaps, on the other hand, yeah, have a few kind of negative traits. So they often don't have a strategy behind them. They're just some kind of pick and mix of features that does not have a coherent or a mutually reinforcing um, thread to them. Bad roadmaps generally start the planning process, whereas good roadmaps like finish the planning process. So generally you figure out what you're going to do and then you lay it out on a roadmap to have a look at how it looks overall. You don't pick a bunch of features, stick them on the roadmap, and then say, that's my strategy. Because you're unlikely to get that kind of um, you know, coherent view of what's going on, or coherent plan of what's going on. So just as good roadmaps help you build credibility, bad roadmaps will destroy credibility by giving a false sense of accuracy about what you're planning to build or when it might be delivered, and therefore leading to false expectations of what you might deliver, when it might arrive, the feeling of broken promises, and therefore you get that sense of like, oh, actually, we can't trust the product teams, or the product teams are always late because you've kind of miscommunicated the state of what you're planning to do. So strict credibility. Yeah, bad roadmaps, they're kind of they can be very output focused. And whilst a lot of roadmaps will have some kind of outputs on them, when that output is detached from the results that you want to get to, that is generally a bad thing because outputs only make sense in the context of being able to deliver results or outcomes. Yeah. And bad roadmaps also very often, if they're out of date, if they're not used as a kind of regular tool, as they're not a kind of a living document, then again, you're going to get this sense of actually they are going to miscommunicate what you're doing, and they're going to lead people, they're going to give them the wrong impression of what you're focused on, and that is a bad thing. Okay, so that was kind of very quickly some different principles of roadmaps, why we have them. Let's talk through a few different formats. So we've kind of categorized all the roadmaps we could find and found about six formats. And um, we've got like a whole bunch on the Hustle Badger website, which you can of real like roadmaps you can go and have a look at. And particularly if you're looking for public roadmaps, we've got a number of examples of those which we can run through. But these are kind of the six kind of high level categories that we've seen and we kind of have a view on. These broadly go from the more strategic end of things to the more tactical end of things. So now, next, later. This one, expect you all heard of, very popular product roadmap format. So you have your three columns, what you're working on now, what you're going to plan to work on straight after that, and what you're going to do, like not next, but sometime in the future. And you can often kind of have some kind of, metrics, some objective that is guiding what you work on here. You can kind of jazz this up a bit, have different, themes or hashtags or whatever out you're kind of associating with each of these items as well. The general idea behind now, next, later roadmaps is that when you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, you don't know necessarily what you'll build. So you're trying to focus on problems rather than solutions. And because you don't know what you're going to build, then the amount of time that you might spend building it is also unclear. So you don't communicate roadmap deadlines when you're hit. So philosophically, I think this is quite strong. And when you are doing like very exploratory, work with very low certainty, this can be a good choice. I say in most companies, this is going to be very unsatisfying for stakeholders and generally is not going to be well received by people outside of products because they will not be comfortable with that level of uncertainty. So they're going to want to see like, okay, if we are making a bet on a particular area or a particular initiative, how much investment is that? Yeah, how are we valuing the opportunity? What's the ROI? They're going to want some kind of indications of those things. They may not look for complete certainty, but they're going to want some indications. And now next data might not give them enough kind of information there. So Alan's making a great point that you'll see variations of this where you can add a column to the left of the now, so you can kind of almost have a kind of like what we've just released, and you can almost show like what have you done in the past. And I think if you're going to do a kind of now, next, later roadmap, then having a kind of like recently shipped column is a really good way of giving people that kind of yardstick, that milestone of um, how fast is the team like outputting stuff, of shipping stuff, and how much impact is it tending to deliver. And then it makes it much easier for people to kind of extrapolate forwards and be like, oh, okay, fine. So if that's what you've done the last month or the last quarter, I can understand what you're going to go and work on, in the um, next phase, in the next quarter. So Sophia's asking, is it good, bad practice to add a date ranges to each of the columns? Yeah, and I think that that's another way that people often adapt this is they sort of say, hey, they almost kind of go into almost the next kind of roadmap that we'll see, or they do somewhat halfway house where they say like, hey, this is effectively like, the quarter we're in now, this is going to be the next quarter, and this is going to be the rest of the year. So you might add some kind of loose date ranges to that as well. And a couple of great points here from people saying, you could also, as well as talking about what you're going to deliver, you could also have sections here where you talk about what is in discovery. Um, and uh, you know, you could think about your delivery not as being how long is this going to take, but how much time are we allocating for this? What are we time boxing for delivery? So like maybe we think that category pages is something that we're willing to spend up to 4 weeks on, and we're going to see whatever we can get done in that time. So that's the first format, now, next, later. If you want to get a little bit more, you know, um, directive on how much time you're spending on things, then you get something a bit like this, like a quarterly roadmap. So it's again, it's you're going to put on maybe month by month, maybe quarter by quarter, but like some kind of like medium term time frame, you're going to divide up the main themes that you've got. So you say, hey, like we've kind of sized these opportunities. Search filters, that's quite a big topic. We think we're going to spend roughly 2 quarters on that. Then we think we're going to spend roughly a quarter on browse, and then we'll move on to personalized recommendations. Okay. So this is really useful if you're doing sort of like annual planning type of exercises where it's likely that over time the teams are going to kind of drift off into different things. But the exercise of planning is quite useful just to make sure that you're allocating your teams. So, okay, do we want a buyers, a sellers, and a growth team? Do we have a feeling of what they might spend their time on over the next 12 months? That's quite a useful exercise to make sure you're kind of, you know, at a given moment in time, you're kind of positioning your teams over the right problem areas. So, and then you can also think about other teams. If marketing knows that make an offer type of functionality, that's going to open up a whole bunch of opportunities for them to run marketing campaigns, but it's not coming to the end of the year. That's fine. They then know that they don't need to know the precise like deadline for when that launches. They just know that really they're not going to think about it at all for the first 3 quarters of the year. So it already helps you do some kind of like high level alignment between different functions.
I feel like we have lost Ed. Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Um, yeah, we have lost Ed. I'm not really sure what to do. Should we open up a general discussion right now, and wait for him to get back? I can see some good comments in the chat. So, for example, Alan, you've been saying less granular certainty of distant timeframes. So you'd use halves instead as your tool.
Yeah, and more for at least for the Q3 and Q4 section of it. Q1, Q2, we'd probably still keep in quarters. Yep.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense when it's kind of like the ice water steam logic, right? Oh, we've got Ed back. Do we have Ed back? He's lurking, but I can't hear him.
Sorry, we do have Ed back.
Yeah, you
Sorry about
froze.
that. I'm not quite sure. I think I got kicked out of the Wi-Fi somehow. There we go. Anyway, I will continue. Um, okay, so that's your quarterly roadmap. So it's sort of like a little bit more commitment than a now next later, but obviously still quite high level. And this is good for that kind of like high level like executive conversations or your quarterly planning. Getting a little bit more granular still, you might have something like this. I call it hybrid, you could call it monthly, I guess. So here, I mean, again, I've done this over the course of a year, but you can see that, yeah, you're kind of just getting actually you've kind of scoped out some high level projects here. You've got some major launches that you want to communicate. Um, this is almost the kind of like is it even worth calling this out as like different from the quarterly roadmap? It's still kind of giving you that kind of general sense of yeah, we know basically what we're planning to work on. We're expecting this probably to change over the course of the year, but it gives this sense of this is roughly what we'll work on. It gives some color to like each of the teams. I'm using a kind of marketplace kind of example here. So you've got, buyers, sellers, so demand and supply sides, you've got payments, you've got fraud. Um, do we know what the big blocks of work are likely to be? Now, obviously, we might get halfway through the year and introduce something else, but this is enough for other teams to think about what's going on. So, a couple of questions here. What do we do if priorities are constantly changing? And yeah, what do we do if your team is unwilling to plan? So I think in these cases, right, yeah, are your priorities constantly changing? Like, well, why are they changing? Is that because you're getting different direction from the leadership level, or are you getting different, or are you kind of changing your mind because you're doing different discovery at the team level? I there's little point doing planning beyond the point where you've got any idea of what you're doing, right? So if you're basically saying like, hey, after 6 months, we have no idea what we'll be doing, that's fine. Like, don't don't put anything after 6 months. But I'd also kind of go back to, well, what is the job to be done at the roadmap? The roadmap is a communication tool for stakeholders. So is your roadmap like satisfying your stakeholders and their needs? Because if stakeholders want to know what you're doing 12 months out, for whatever reason, that's how they're thinking about, the CEO wants to know that because they want to know if they've got a big enough, the right size of product team. You can't just not answer that question by not putting it on your roadmap. Okay. So I'd think about this more in terms of communicating. Does the roadmap really show like what you're delivering? Probably not. I'd think about this much more as like, what is our appetite to cover different topics? And what is the balance of things that we are going to address? So I think at this kind of strategic level, you're really not making commitments that, you're not saying like, oh, size filter is definitely going to kick it off March 1st and it will be shipped on, you know, May 30th. You're really saying, hey, buyers is going to cover 4 or 5 big topics over the course of this year. Size filters is one of them. And that is kind of, about as big as the other things that we're going to do. Um, So you just want to be really careful, like how people are interpreting this and make sure that they understand what they're seeing on the page. Okay, we've done three. This one, the next one, dashboard roadmap. Is it a roadmap? I mean, I include it because it's doing a lot of the things that other types of roadmaps might be doing, right? So if you've got an organization, you've got where the company as a whole or the CEO just wants to have a kind of a finger on the pulse of the product team and know what's going on, then this can be a really good way of talking about what's in the pipeline, as it were. So this gives you quite a lot of flexibility in terms of it's almost like a now, next, later. You've got your kind of some of those ideas that people were calling out in the chat where you've got your recently shipped column, right? So you can talk about, oh, here are all the things that we've shipped recently, so you get a sense of the rhythm of the releases of each of the teams. You know what the next thing is that they're going to release, that they're working on, and they've probably got a defined date for that because it's fully scoped. The engineers are already working on it. They because they know what they're building, they can make a very clear estimate. And then you've got these delivery windows, which are slightly more vague for things that are in the backlog because you haven't fully decided what those actually are. And maybe those are more like problems to solve rather than solutions that you're going to deliver. So you've got that sort of sense of like, okay, this is what we're working on. Everyone can see the kind of the delivery side of things. And then at the top, you've got a bunch of different metrics. And these are your kind of key metrics that the key results that you're actually trying to move. So you've got your, whatever it is here, this is obviously a kind of delivery style, just eat type of thing where you've got delivery times, purchase rates, order values. Great. How are those numbers changing? And, how far along that kind of journey from baseline to target are we? Maybe you can pull in something more qualitative as well, like your NPS. So this, although it doesn't have that kind of visualization the same way as the hybrid one kind of really shows you like how things will pan out over the course of the year. This is really good for kind of keeping people informed day to day. And this could be something you're updating on like a weekly basis and could be on a dashboard, could be in an email, wherever it is. Again, getting a little bit more tactical, then again, we've got here what I call an OKR roadmap. So this is for an individual team. So you probably have an overall objective that they're trying to hit. I call it OKRs because you're going to have your objective, which I think I've kind of cut off the picture. Apologies about that at the top and the team. Your key results, those are going to be your key metrics you're trying to hit. So you're going to have a baseline and target for each of those, and you're going to track those week by week or whatever your reporting cadence is. And then below that, you've got the things, your backlog, basically. Like, what are the main initiatives? And this is not going to be like every last little ticket and ad hoc request and bug, right? These are going to be the main planned bits of work that you're expecting are going to move these metrics that you're targeting. And then for each of these initiatives, right, you might kind of lightly plan out when you're expecting them to land. So again, I like this kind of delivery window kind of concept where stuff that's really far out, you don't know when that's going to land because you don't know what you're building. But stuff that you are currently working on, then in that case, um, by the time the engineers are working on it, you do have a clear idea of what you're building. Otherwise, the engineers wouldn't be working on it. And because you've got a clear idea of the work involved, you can set a high integrity commitment where you say, like, right, it's this much work, the capacity of the team is this, therefore it will launch on this date. And then if you want to go even more kind of granular than that, you get to a kind of a classic Gantt chart style of things. So here you then got, these are really good when you're doing large projects involving multiple teams that all have, independencies between them. because in that case, the coordinating that activity between the teams is is really important because it will set the overall timeline for the project. And you may have marketing spend or other costs that are need to be triggered at the right moment if they're going to be really effective. So um, in this case, then doing a lot of upfront work to work out, well, how long is it going to take to ship, and then being able to give a high degree of accuracy about when things are going to land, and being able to track that on a regular basis is going to be very valuable. And it's also going to mean that if things do go off track, you're going to see that upfront and you'll be able to course correct quickly. And whilst you still have time to course correct before before things ship. So this is obviously not appropriate if you are working in a single team that's very autonomous, that is working on an, very uncertain area where there's lots of ambiguity. Like, why would you make them go for a Gantt chart, right? In that case, the focus for the team is going to be much more on discovery. It's going to be much more on kind of figuring out what problems they need to solve. And then you're going to want a roadmap that gives you an appropriate amount of flexibility and doesn't commit the team to unrealistic deadlines. So this is where I say, like, if you choose the right roadmap to reflect the kind of work that the team is doing, then it's going to help you kind of communicate what you're doing and it's going to help you build trust. If you pick a type of roadmap where it's inappropriate for the kind of work that you're doing, you're going to end up making false promises and that's going to end up destroying credibility. So the roadmaps at each end of the spectrum are the worst for destroying credibility, or the easiest to destroy credibility with. So Gantt charts, if you really don't know what you're doing, Gantt charts, you're going to end up making commitments which are just complete fantasy. You won't hit them, and your credibility will be shot. Conversely, you go back to the now next later. If you try to do a now next later roadmap where you're trying to coordinate a project between three different product teams, and marketing has a 3 million campaign spend that's riding on you hitting a particular date, this is going to destroy your credibility because you're not meeting the needs of your stakeholders, which is to have a high degree of certainty about when things land. I'm just going to go through my final points. My one more thing. Okay, so whichever roadmap you choose, prioritization and how you sequence these things, how you allocate your time and people, like that is a political process. It's never going to be completely science based or kind of there's never going to be a definitely right answer. There's always going to be an element of interpretation, of human alignment, of judgment in it, and you cannot escape that. And because of that, like the frameworks and the templates here will only take you so far. You can't just pick the magic template and be like, right, this is the one thing, throw it out into the world and expect that everyone will stop complaining at you or everyone will be immediately satisfied. You know, if you really understand the needs of your stakeholders and who your different stakeholders are, then you're probably going to be able to pick a framework or a model here that satisfies most of their needs. And that is going to help you stay more in control and be a bit more proactive about your stakeholder comms. So I'd really think about it that way around. Like, as a product manager, think about the roadmap as the product, or the comms is the product, right? And the users of that product are your stakeholders. So how do you serve their needs and how do you design the comms to serve the needs of the stakeholders? Right? It's got to be that way around. Okay, so digging into questions. Just going through Alan's question here. Do you have some favorite approaches for showing roadmaps of landing new products or features that you've already launched, but you're now working to drive adoption? And follow up, also curious about formats that show cross-team efforts around landing go-to-market actions of what you've launched. Yeah, so on that note, Alan, I'd say like so when I've been working with marketing teams on big projects, I've quite often used a Gantt chart like this. So Susanna will know this well. We worked together at FutureLearn when Susanna was COO running the marketing team. I was CPO, CPTO, and we had a project which was at one point, 4.5 month project, involved 5 different product teams. And we kind of lined all of that up with, you know, lots of different marketing activity for when it launched. In that case, we had like a massive Gantt chart basically that allowed us to kind of track were we on time for our delivery deadline. And the benefits of that were halfway through, the project, we realized that one of the product teams was falling behind. We had that visibility because we had this massive Gantt chart. And then because of that insight, we managed to, reallocate engineers basically and get that team back on track and therefore hit our deadline. So I think if you're doing those kinds of, there's a time and a place for waterfall. This was one of them, and it had real value for the company. A different example I'd say is because you talked about, what about when you're shipping different phases of the same thing? In that case, I've often done more like this. I've quite often done this. This is probably like my favorite, like all-purpose roadmap. If you're just doing it for a single team, because it gives you a nice balance between what we're working on, keeping us focused on the metrics, and when you combine it with these delivery windows, it gives you like that right amount of kind of precision that makes people comfortable about what you're doing, but doesn't overcommit the teams. And here you can have a kind of like, oh, we're going to ship, whatever, and then we're going to break out phase two, phase three as separate lines, and we'll track their delivery at, um, separately from the initial launch. Okay, a few more questions coming in here. Aiden's asking, do you have ideas about how you show or reconcile changes in the roadmap after priorities change? Yeah, I think that's a great question. I might come back to this one, like not off the top of my head. I think, yeah, if that is a real issue, I'd certainly think about, yeah, when that change happens, yeah, how are you visualizing the cost of change? Um, because we all know it's there, right? If you suddenly change priorities, then you're gonna that's gonna slow the teams down. Do you do that on the roadmap? Do you do that on a chart? Do you kind of like show the wasted time? I think I don't have any specific ideas where I can kind of like point to it, but I do know exactly what you mean. What do you say to a roadmap who wants to know what the 3-year roadmap is? So in that case, for a CEO who wants to know what the 3-year roadmap is, I would very much be thinking at, the kind of this kind of level, but not even showing it quarter by quarter, right? Because you're probably going to show, hey, this is what we're doing in year one, year two, year three. And I think, again, like that might seem ridiculous from a product point of view. You're going to be like, well, how do we know what we're going to be working on in year three? Sure. What is the need that the CEO has there? Because probably they want a 3-year roadmap to know, do they need to be raising another round of finance because they need to scale the product team up? Or how do they go and give a really inspiring vision at a company conference? Or how do they tell the board like what their vision is longer term? So once you understand the needs of the CEO, like the needs are probably not going to seem as unreasonable as the solution when the solution is a 3-year roadmap, right? So understand the needs and then figure out between in conjunction with the CEO, like what is the artifact? Is that a roadmap? Is that something else that kind of solves that need? Because you might find that, yeah, they want an inspiring vision, but really that's a vision. It's not a roadmap. Or you might find that actually they do want a roadmap, but that's just a kind of it's a talking point for them with the board or with big customers. It's showing, you're in an enterprise sector and you want to show customers that you've got plenty of ideas and you're going to be building an ecosystem and you're kind of committed to the sector. So there can be, and in those cases, you probably don't need to really be committing to the things that you're doing. You just need to have some exciting ideas that you're sticking down. So there we go. Pavel, let me have a quick look at here. Context, same product, 2 market geographies. First market really well established, the other market with fairly new. How do you create a roadmap to attend to the new market needs while still delivering the initiatives for the first market? So again, I mean, the question here is that if you've got effectively you've got two, say, teams where you've got or two stakeholders with very different needs or very different situations, like do you have to have the same format for both of them, or can you have different formats for both? So can you recut the same information in different ways for different stakeholders? Or if you've got different teams who are working in different ways, can you just have different roadmaps for each of those? Um, Again, like often I found the kind of if you're reporting across multiple teams, some kind of variation of the dashboard, if you're reporting on a single team, the OKR roadmap, these are generally pretty versatile, day to day. Um, but that's something where you need to kind of go and kind of experiment a little bit with exactly how does that look like in your teams. Yeah, Pavel, does that answer your question? I'm just rereading your question to make sure I've understood it. Aiden's asking, do I have a preferred planning tool which works well for building roadmaps? Yes, I do. I mean, as you can, or as you might be able to tell, like I really like Excel or Google Sheets. Very, very versatile. Not very pretty, but it's very versatile and it gets the job done and anyone can use it. And the other thing I'd say is like, okay, well, if it's not Excel, then maybe you want something that is almost deliberately less precise, like Miro. So I think for this hybrid roadmap, actually, where you can leave a little bit of edges around the boxes, and maybe the boxes aren't all precisely the same size, right? You can kind of give it a bit of imprecision by design, the same way that you'd have a wireframe rather than a high fidelity prototype. It's not just because it's quicker, right? It's also because you're trying to put people's focus on certain elements and you're trying to get their focus on the overall picture, not the precise dates. Um, so Miro as well has got new functionality for structured data. So they allow you to pull together roadmaps quite quickly. There are lots of fancy tools that are kind of product specific. I tend to find the problem with those is that not enough of the company is familiar with those tools for them to um, be comfortable using them. And again, like so they're great for product teams because product teams can make these like really fancy roadmaps like really easily, and then they completely fail in the job to be done of the roadmap, which is they don't satisfy the needs of the stakeholders. So I'd always think about where are my stakeholders, what are the tools that they're using, and is there some way I can get my information, like the contents of the roadmap, into a tool that my stakeholders are familiar with. Notion is also quite cool. Sophia's kind of pointing that out because you've effectively got a database there, so you could have a backlog, which you then convert into either a now, next, later type of table or a roadmap view. Um, the probably so you can have a view like this, and you can have a view like a bit more like this with Notion. The problem that I've got, and I haven't checked Notion recently to see if they've updated that, is you don't have this concept of delivery windows. So you generally, if you're scoping something, you've got to put in precise dates, and then that can get misinterpreted. So if you're putting in a kind of placeholder, this is 3 months long, and we'll kick it off 1st of July, but we don't really know because that's 3 months out. It's just very easy for people to kind of see those then precise dates and think they are the real dates. So that's my only kind of concern with Notion, and not 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 solely about Notion, right? You get a few tools like that where if you want duration, you've got to put in precise dates. Okay, we can probably take a couple more questions um, if anyone's got them. Whilst you're having a think about whether you've got any more questions, I am just going to mention that when we send this out, there's going to be a bunch of links in the slides here. So we've got obviously a full kind of how-to guide or playbook on kind of pulling together roadmaps. We've also got this lovely article which has got about 16, 17 different kind of real world roadmaps, so you can see slight variations and get some more inspiration of how they've been pulled together. There are other kind of related articles you might want to check out: quarterly planning, strategy backlogs, and so on. And as I say, kind of got other events, other webinars, and courses that might be of use too. So, Sophia, just adding to the Notion discussion here. So Sophia is saying, I have a database for product backlog requests, and once something has moved to an engineering's backlog, add a date range, which is a multi-select field. Yeah, so you could have like less than a month, 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, and then you can group cards by that roadmap view. Yeah, so that's quite a nice kind of workaround. So instead of putting the kind of to and from dates on something that you've got in Notion, you effectively create your own drop down and give it more of those kind of like high level time zones. Less than a month, 1 to 3 months. How long is this piece of work? What's our appetite for this piece of work? Will we be sharing the recording of the slides? Yes, absolutely, we will be sharing the recording of the slides. And if you signed up to this session on Luma, we will send it to the email address which you signed up to. Okay, cool. I'm going to wrap things up there. Thank you very much for coming along, everyone. Hope that was useful. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or drop me a quick email and I'll do what I can. Have a great evening.